first speaker today is Steve Brown, and his evaluator is David. David, tell us what Steve is working on today.
All right. The purpose of the project is to practice applying feedback, serve as a speech evaluator during a club meeting. And the purpose of this speech is for the member to present a speech and receive feedback from the evaluation. So is this the first time you've done this speech or the second?
First.
Okay. So he'll do this one and then do it again after we give him some feedback. So give him some attaboys and we'll deliver a well-organized speech of any type. And we will focus on his speaking style, maybe humorous and informational. And we'll look forward to this speech and its successor at a later meeting.
David will scrutinize that speech quite well. Steve Brown is here today on the Persuasive Influence track. In his track, he is using the Bill of Rights as a focus for each speech by highlighting one of the original Bill of Rights in our Constitution. Steve's background includes using arms as both a civilian and as an operative of the state. However, he's still confronted and confounded by how people scrutinize the Second Amendment. Steve has found much of that comes from the change of language in the past 232 years. He hopes to shed some light on this change in his speech. What is the meaning of this? What's the meaning of this, Steve Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Fellow Toastmasters, what is the meaning of this? And that is where some of the issues come with the Second Amendment, because keep in mind the Second Amendment, along with the rest of the Bill of Rights, the original 10, as they call them, they were amended in 1791, but yet the Constitution and everything happened years before. So why did that happen? We have George Mason to thank for that. George Mason was the original writer of the Virginia Constitution, and he was a big believer in the individual rights and liberties, and he worried that the Constitution would lend itself to being too controlling on the individual. He took that very seriously, so seriously that he is one of only 3 people that did not sign the original Constitution. And the reason for that is he wanted slavery to be abolished, along with a few other things. He wanted a Bill of Rights on the Constitution, but we had to put that later on. The reason the Bill of Rights actually went through was him and Thomas Jefferson pushed for it, along with numerous other people that felt that we had to have something to protect the individual. And there were certain states that wanted to come to be part of the United States, because again, there was only 13 that originally started. There were a few states that said, we'll do it, but your Constitution doesn't allow for individual rights. Those individual states actually had constitutions, and they protected the individual. So George Mason said, let's push for this, let's make it happen. And in 1791, they got it pushed. What does it say? A well-regulated militia, being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia, that part people scrutinize and they just nitpick it quite a bit. So let's ask ourselves, what does well-regulated mean at that time? That's the important part, at that time. Because if I show you a picture of a dog, you say that's a dog, but I say, no, that's a cat now. You'll be like, no, at the time, that's what I'm going for. I'm wanting you to understand. Definitions matter, and not just in the Second Amendment, but anytime you talk to people and we discuss and we give a speech and we're out here helping people in the public, definitions matter. Because if you're speaking the same language I am, we can convey ideas And when the founding fathers and the writers of the Bill of Rights said a well-regulated militia, here's what they mean. And we know they meant this because they said it. Well-regulated at that time meant in good working order, functional, and efficient. Militia throws people off too because, well, the military is the government. Police are a form of the government. That's true, but that's not what the militia meant at that time. George Mason himself said, I ask you, sir, what is the militia? All able-bodied men, except for a few public officials. Think about that. The man that wrote and is considered the father of the Bill of Rights said that everyone is in the militia, except for the politicians. Think about that. Other writers on the original Bill of Rights said roughly the same thing. The militia is made up of the people. And that part is important because the next part is for the security of a free state. And sometimes we think, oh, the state, that's the government, or it's Virginia, or it's Kentucky, but sometimes, and this is what our writers originally thought, was the state of freedom, the state of liberty. Water has different states. It can be frozen, it could be gaseous, it could be liquid. It's a state of being. So when they say the security of a free state, they're referring to just the act of being free. An armed people, which we know the militia stands for the people, to be free, you need to be armed. And the reason for that is, if some bad person comes over the hill, we have to defend ourselves first. You hear the joke nowadays, a firearm is seconds away while a police officer is minutes away. When something's happening right now, we can't wait. And back then, it was the exact same way. You were on the frontier, you didn't say, oh, I hope the government gets here. No, the government said you can defend yourself. That was part of it. And at the same time, the country stood up and we became the defenders. What's the next part? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right of the people. The Constitution does not give me the right to self-defense. It shall not be infringed. The government can't infringe my right to defend myself. So when it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms, I can keep something. We know what keeping means. If I give you $1, say keep that for me today. If I say, will you keep my cat? You'll keep my cat. You don't let it go, you keep it. We still say bearing is holding, showing off, allowing to be kept. That's still what it means. The last part is very important. It says shall not be infringed. This is important. Shall in a legal document means it will happen. As a former law enforcement, I learned the legal term for that is, or the legal determinant of that is the difference between will, may, and shall. Many laws say the officer may do this. The officer may arrest. They may cite you. They may do something. But shall means you will do whatever that law says. So when the Constitution, when the Bill of Rights says shall not be infringed, it means shall not be infringed. So these definitions matter in the crux of what we're talking about. And as public speakers and as Toastmasters, using the correct definitions for what you want to convey to your audience is very important. And as I said earlier, the Second Amendment does not give me or you the right to bear arms. It codifies that it shall not be infringed by the government. And when we talk to people, be sure the definitions we use mean something. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Steve. Very,
you.
very interesting. Great lesson.